Twilight by W.B. Yeats. Dreams that have no moral. Well, before I go into this, probably the longest program in this series, let me remind you that the dreams come from three sources. We have ourselves, of course, because what happens to us in our waking life, we review it in our sleep. And that includes our desires, what we're exposed to, etc., etc. But there is the dreams that the demons bring upon the people. And some of these are just to distract us. Some of them are for other purposes. And of course, there are the dreams that God sends. Or God's side, as we would say. The friend who heard about Maeve and the hazel stick went to the workhouse another day. She found the old people cold and wretched like flies in the winter. She said, but they forgot the cold when they began to talk. A man had just left them, who played cards in a rath with the people of Barry, who had played very fair. And one old man had seen an enchanted black pig one night, and there were two old people my friend had heard quarreling as to whether Raftery or Callanan was the better poet. One had said of the Raftery, he was a big man, and his songs have gone through the whole world. I remember him well. He had a voice like the wind, but the other was certain that you would stand in the snow to listen to Callanan. Presently, an old man began to tell my friend a story, and all listened delightedly, bursting out into laughter now and then. The story which I am going to tell you, just as it was told, was one of those old, rambling, moralless tales, which are the delight of the poor and the hard-driven, wherever life is left in its natural simplicity. They tell of a time when nothing had consequences, when even if you were killed, if only you had a good heart, and someone would bring you to life again. Someone would bring you to life again with the touch of a rod. And when, if you were a prince and happened to look exactly like your brother, you might go to bed with this queen and have only a little quarrel afterwards. We too, if we were so weak and poor that everything threatened us with misfortune, would remember, if foolish people left us alone, every old dream that has been strong enough to fling the weight of the world from its shoulders. There was a king one time who was very much put out because he had no son, and he went out at last to consult his chief advisor, and the chief advisor said, it's easy enough managed if you do as I tell you. Let you send someone, says he, to such a place to catch a fish, and when the fish is brought in, give it to the queen, your wife, to eat. And the base of reality is a very important thing for us to be pursuing now, isn't it? So the king sent as he was told, and the fish was caught and brought in, and he gave it to the cook and bade her put it before the fire, but to be careful with it, and to not let any blob or blister rise on it. But it is impossible to cook a fish before the fire without the skin of it rising in some place or other. And so there came a blob on the skin, and the cook put her finger on it to smooth it down, and then she put her finger into her mouth to cool it. And so she got a taste of the fish, and then it was sent up to the queen, and she ate it, and what was left of it was thrown out into the yard. And there was a mare in the yard, and a greyhound, and they ate the bits that were thrown out. And before a year was out, the queen had a young son, and the cook had a young son, and the mare had 2 foals, and the greyhound had 2 pups, and the 2 young sons were sent out for a while to some place to be cared. And when they came back, they were so much like one another that no person could know which was the queen's son and which was the cook's. And the queen was vexed at that, and she went to the chief adviser and said, "Tell me some way that I can know which is my own son, for I don't like to be giving the same eating and drinking to the cook's son as to my own." "It's easy to know that," said the chief's adviser. "If you do as I tell you, go you outside, and stand at the door. They will be coming in by, and when they see you, your own son will bow his head, but the cook's son will only laugh." So she did, the nature versus nurture argument is an important one to consider. So she did that, and when her own son bowed his head, her servants put a mark on him, that she would know him again. And when they were all sitting at their dinner after that, she said to Jack, "That was the cook's son. It is time for you to go out, for you to go away out of this, for you are not my son." And her own son, that we call Bill, said, "Do not send him away. Are we not brothers?" But Jack said, "I would have been long ago out of this house if I knew it was not my own father and mother owned it." And for all Bill could say to him, he would not stop. But before he went, they were by the well that was in the garden. And he said to Bill, "If harm ever comes to me, that water on the top of the well will be blood, and the water below will be honey." And he took one of the pups, and one of the 2 horses that was foaled after the mare eating the fish. And the wind that was after him could not catch him, and he caught the wind that was before him, and he went on till he came to a weaver's house, and he asked him for a lodging, and he gave it to him. And then he went on till he came to a king's house, and he went in at the door to ask, did he want a servant? "All I want," said the king, "is a boy that will drive out the cows to the field every morning, and bring them in at night to be milked." "I will do that for you," said Jack. So the king engaged him. In the morning Jack was sent out with the 24 cows, and the place he was told to drive them to had not a blade of grass in it for them, but was full of stones. So Jack looked about for some place where there would be better grass, and after a while he saw a field with a good green grass in it, and it belonged to a giant. So he knocked down a bit of the wall, and drove them in. And he went up himself into an apple tree, and began to eat the apples. Then the giant came into the field. "Fee, fa, fum," says he. "I smell the blood of an Irishman." "Fee, fa, fum, I smell the blood of an Irishman. I see you where you are, up in the tree," he said. "You are too big for one mouthful, and too small for 2 mouthfuls. And I don't know what I'll do with you if I don't grind you up and make snuff for my nose." "As you are strong, be merciful," says Jack up in the tree. "Come down out of that, you little dwarf," said the giant, or I'll tear you and the tree asunder." So Jack came down. Would you sooner be driving red-hot knives into one another's hearts, said the giant, or would you sooner be fighting one another on red-hot flags? Fighting on red-hot flags is what I'm used to at home, said Jack, and your dirty feet will be sinking in them, and my feet will be rising. So then they began the fight. The ground that was hard they made soft, and the ground that was soft they made hard. And they made spring wells come up through the green flags. They were like that all through the day, and no one getting the upper hand of the other. And at last a little bird came and sat on the bush and said to Jack, if you don't make an end of him by sunset, he'll make an end of you. Then Jack put out his strength, and he brought the giant down on his knees. Give me life, says the giant, and I'll give you the 3 best gifts. What are those? Said Jack. A sword that nothing can stand against, and a suit that when you put it on, you will see everybody and nobody will see you, and a pair of shoes that will make you run faster than the wind blows. Where are they? To be found, said Jack. In that red door you see there in the hill. So Jack went and got them out. Where will I try the sword? Says he. Try it on that ugly black stump of a tree, says the giant. I see nothing blacker or uglier than your own head, says Jack. And with that he made one stroke and cut off the giant's head, that it went into the air, and he caught it on the sword as it was coming down, and made 2 halves of it. It is well for you that I did not join the body again, said the head, or you would have never been able to strike it off again. I did not give you the chance of that, said Jack, and he brought away the great suit with him. Well, obviously the giant must be some sort of spirit. So he brought the cows home at evening, and everyone wondered at all the milk they gave that night. And when the king was sitting at dinner with the princess, his daughter, and the rest, he said, I think I only hear 2 roars from behind tonight, in place of 3. The next morning Jack went out again with the cows, and he saw another field full of grass, and he knocked down the wall and let the cows in. All happened the same as the day before, but the giant that came this time had 2 heads, and they fought together. And the little bird came and spoke to Jack as before, and when Jack had brought the giant down, he said, Give me my life, and I'll give you the best thing I have. What is that? Says Jack. It is a suit that you can put on, and you will see everyone, but no one can see you. Where is it? Said Jack. It is inside that little red door at the side of the hill. So Jack went and brought out the suit, and then he cut off the giant's 2 heads, and caught them coming down, and made 4 halves of them. And they said it was well for him that he had not given them time to join the body. That night, when the cows came home, they gave so much milk that all the vessels that could be found were filled up. The next morning Jack went out again, and all happened as before. And the giant, this time, had 4 heads, and Jack made 8 halves of them. And the giant had told him to go to a little blue door in the side of the hill, and there he got a pair of shoes that when he put them on would go faster than the wind. That night the cows gave so much milk that there were not vessels enough to hold it, and it was given to the tenants and to the poor people passing the road, and the rest was thrown out the windows. I was passing that way myself, and I got a drink of it. Did I mention Maeve? Maeve, yeah. Maeve is the first person to bring cows to England, so they couldn't stomach much milk. That's part of what's being said. I just buy that one myself, and I got a drink of it. That night, the king said to Jack, "Why is it the cows are giving so much milk these days? Are you bringing them to any other grass?" "I'm not," said Jack, "but I have a good stick, and whenever they would stop still or lay down." "Oh, I have a good stick, and whenever they would stop still or lay down, I give them the blows of it, that they jump and leap over walls and stones and ditches. And that's the way to make the cows give plenty of milk." And that night, at the diner, the king said, "I hear no roars at all." The next morning, the king and the princess were watching at the windows to see what Jack would do when he got to the field. And Jack knew they were there, and he got the stick and began to batter the cows. And they went leaping and jumping over stones and walls and ditches. "There's no lie in what Jack said," said the king then. Now, there was a great serpent at that time, used to come every 7 years, and he had to get a king's daughter to eat, unless she would have some good man to fight for her. And it was the princess at the palace, at the place Jack had, to be given to it that time. The king had been feeding a bully underground for 7 years, and you may believe he got the best of everything to be ready to fight it. And when the time came, the princess went out, and the bully with her down to the shore. And when they got there, what did he do but to tie the princess to a tree, the way the serpent would be able to swallow her easy, with no delay. And he himself went and hid up in an ivy tree. We have an ivy tree here, don't we? And Jack knew what was going on, for the princess had told him about it, and had asked, would he help her? But he said he would not. But he came out now, and he put on the suit he had taken from the first giant. And he came by the place the princess was, but she didn't know him. "Is that right for a princess to be tied to a tree?" said Jack. "It is not, indeed," said she. And she told him what had happened, and how the serpent was coming to take her. "If you will let me sleep for a while with my head in your lap," said Jack, "you could wake me when it is coming." So he did that, and she awakened him when she saw the serpent coming, and Jack got up and fought with it, and drove it back into the sea. And when he had cut the rope that fastened her, and he went away, the bully came down then out of the tree, and he brought the princess to where the king was, and he said, I got a friend of mine to come and fight the serpent today, where I was a little timorous after being so long shut up underground. But I'll do the fighting myself tomorrow." The next day they went out again, and the same thing happened. The bully tied up the princess where the serpent could come at her fair and easy, and went up himself to hide in the ivy tree. Then Jack put on the suit he had taken from the second giant, and he walked out, and the princess did not know him, but she told him all that had happened yesterday, and how some young gentleman she did not know had come up and saved her. So Jack asked, might he lie down and take a sleep with his head in her lap, the way she could awake him. And all happened the same way as the day before, and the bully gave her up to the king, and said he had brought another of his friends to fight for her that day. The next day, she was brought down to the shore as before, and a great many people gathered to see the serpent that was coming to bring the king's daughter away. And Jack brought out the suit of clothes he had brought away from the third giant, and she did not know him. and they talked as before. But when he was asleep this time, she thought she would make sure of being able to find him again, and she took out her scissors and cut off a piece of his hair and made a little patchet of it and put it away. And she did another thing. She took off one of the shoes that was on his feet, and when she saw the serpent coming, she woke him. And he said, "This time I will put the serpent in a way that he will eat no more king's daughters." So he took out the sword he had got from the giant, and he put it in at the back of the serpent's neck, the way blood and water came spouting out that went for 50 miles inland, and made an end of him. And then he made off, and no one saw what way he went. And the bully brought the princess to the king, and claimed to have saved her, and it is he who is made much of, and was the right-hand man after that. But when the feast was made ready for the wedding, the princess took out the last bit of hair she had, and she said she would marry no one but the man whose hair would match that. And she showed the shoe, and said that she would marry no one whose foot would not fit that shoe as well. And the bully tried to put on the shoe, but so much as his toe would not go into it. And as to his hair, it did not match at all to the bit of hair she had cut from the man that saved her. So then the king gave a great ball to bring all the chief men of the country together to try would the shoe fit any of them. And they were all going to carpenters and joiners, getting bits of their feet cut off, to try could they wear the shoe. But it was no use. Not one of them could get it on. There's so many stories we can tie to these sorts of things. Remember the story of the old story of Set and Osiris, and oh brother, here's a coffin just for you. And he was the one that fit the coffin. Of course, it was fit for him. It fits me perfectly. Yes, and shuts up the thing. And then the king went to his chief advisor and asked what could he do. And the chief advisor bade him to give another ball. And this time he said, "Give it to poor as well as rich." So the ball was given, and many came flocking to it. But the shoe would not fit any one of them. And the chief advisor said, "Is everyone here that belongs to the house?" "They are all here," said the king, "except the boy that minds the cows, and I would not like him to be coming up here." Jack was below in the yard at the time, and he heard what the king said, and he was very angry, and he went up and got his sword and came running up the stairs to strike off the king's head. But the man that kept the gate met him on the stairs before he could get to the king, and quieted him down. And when he got to the top of the stairs, and the princess saw him, she gave a cry and ran into his arms. And they tried the shoe, and it fitted him, and his hair matched to the piece that had been cut off. So then they were married, and a great feast was given 3 days and 3 nights. There was this woman who wanted to marry me once, and she made a point of cutting my hair. But she would have recognized me without such things. But it's an important custom in some cultures. But I'm going to save the last 3 pages of this for another time.